Hello, my name is Andy and I am the Village Idiot. I'm armed with a car and a GoPro and an unhealthy amount of time on my hands. I'm using that time to attempt to visit every civil parish in England. You're watching the North West Leicestershire series. There's 31 parishes here based around the towns of Colville and Ashby de la Zouch. Which one are we in today? Welcome back to North West Leicestershire again, people. The sun is shining. I've taken the hoodie off for this episode because it's now starting to get pretty warm out here. And this one might, well, get the old blood flowing and the old juices going and some sweat coming off my brow as well. The reason for that is because I know at some point in this episode I will have to climb a hill. It doesn't matter which way around I go around this route, there is a hill involved somewhere. So, you know, just got to basically get on with it. Welcome to Osgathorpe. Here's my disclaimer for people who may be watching me for the first time. I say things as I would in my native accent and dialect. As a result, I may not pronounce things in the same way as the locals do. Remember, I'm a visitor. It's impossible to know everything. Leave me a comment, spin me a like and bash that subscribe button. Let's get to today's parish video. Osgathorpe, Asgautr's farm. As far as North West Leicestershire goes, I'm not sure anything will top Belton, but Osgathorpe is going to have a go. The next parish over from Belton to the west, Osgathorpe sits within a fold in the Leicestershire Hills. It's not very big, but pretty much whichever way you walk around it, you will have to walk uphill at some point. There are two main areas of habitation. One of them is centred around the original Osgathorpe village in the valley below the B5324 between Belton and Ashby de la Zouch. The second is a much newer area built on and around that road and the hilltop which it traverses. There does appear on overhead maps to be a discernible gap between the two. The reason for that is all to do with the industrial history of the area. Stick with me and you'll see what that's all about. For such a small place, features are quite plentiful. It has a small but pleasant 14th century church, an old grammar school and several water features. On the road to Belton there's also a chapel. There were two pubs here until very recently, but now the Royal Oak and the Story Arms have both closed. They are still occupied though. In short, Osgathorpe did enough to surprise me pleasantly. What looks like a quiet rural village from the outside is really rather absorbing when you dive in deeper. Let's go. We start our walk on Ashby Road, or the B5324 to give it its numerical name. Most of Osgathorpe, the oldest part in fact, lies in the valley to the south of this road, but these houses and a few others at the top of Dawson's Road form the newer part of the village. It's all residential and not that exciting. The largest landmark is a telephone exchange at the top of Main Street. This one serves Griffydam, Newbold Colorton, Thringston, Worthington and of course Osgathorpe. Everything so far has been on top of a noisy hill, so now we need to head into the valley below, where it's more peaceful. This is the old surgery. Dr. Horner once lived here. He was well known for taking a glass of whiskey during home visits, and he had a car with the registration plate 999 Doc. Halfway down the hill is a bus stop. Like Belton, Osgathorpe is served by the number 129, which will get you to either Loughborough or Ashby. As the hill flattens out at the bottom, we reach the former Story Arms. For many years, this was Osgathorpe's main social hub. It struggled to attract drinkers in its later years though, due to a local clampdown on drink driving. There were plans to reopen it, and I've linked them below. Dead opposite the Story Arms is a phone box, which is now a book exchange. It's thought, by the way, there were 2 previous inns on the site of the Story, the Cock and Mitten and the Seven Stars. It may have originally been built as a farm, nobody really knows. In 1894 it was also used for an inquest after 8-year-old Sarah Springthorpe drowned in a brook. A verdict of accidental death by drowning was recorded. After passing an old blacksmith shop, it's a house called the Gables next. This was a small public elementary school and it was built in 1836. 40 children were educated here daily. Well, so far so good. Very quiet village is Osgathorpe. I must admit, I think only 1 car has come past me so far. It just tells you, how much this is not a traffic heavy village. And we're about a quarter of the way around the route. Behind me there you can see the old post office. The big giveaway that that's the old post office is because it has the post box in the wall, the Georgian post box no less, from the time of George V, and black as well. Usually the red, this one's black. So let's carry on. We're about to hit a stream on the right hand side which we'll follow for a while. We're heading towards the church next. This brook is the very same which claimed Sarah Springthorpe's life. It doesn't have a name, but it's definitely a major landmark in Osgathorpe. We'll cross it twice on this walk. Here though it runs past the Royal Oak. This was an alehouse named after the tree that King Charles reportedly hid after the Battle of Worcester in 1651 during the Civil War. It's difficult to date when it first traded as an inn, but 1842 is when it gained its first recorded licensee. Main Street once had several other businesses, including a butcher shop at number 10, located at the point where the brook runs under the road. In the days before piped water, villagers washed their clothes in these waters and then bashed them dry on nearby stones. Speaking of stones, the road continues as Chapel Lane, but the chapel in question was pulled down in 1962. It stood where the Osgathorpe village sign, a stone, now sits today. Church Lane next, and this is the former Harley Grammar School, built in 1683. This was endowed by Thomas Harley, who lived in Osgathorpe Hall in the 1660s. He intended the school to produce divinity students who would go on to Cambridge University. The old school is now the village hall. Next up we have the church, and this one's dedicated to St Mary the Blessed Virgin. It dates from the 14th century but was heavily restored in the 19th with the addition of an apse to the chancel. It has a tower with a small pyramid turret which was built at the southwest corner of the church in around 1930. It contains 2 bells which are rung using a clocking method. There are pleasing north and south windows in both the nave and the chancel, and in the south wall of the nave is a very unusual hagioscope or squint, which is set diagonally within the stonework to allow a view of the altar. The old rectory is of course nearby. It was originally much smaller than what you see here. The bay windows were added in the 1850s when the house was extended by raising the roof and replacing the stone of one gable end with brick. It was sold into private ownership in the 1970s. There's another notable house here, Allsop's Cottage. This is an almshouse and it was built for the widow of one clergyman. It exists thanks to John Allsop, who was born in Haddon in 1650. For 13 years he was the rector at Tollerton in Rushcliffe. In his will he left money to build the cottage and it's still here now. Okay, so this is basically the end of the village if you go in this direction, so not much point going much further. We'll turn around, we'll head that way, we'll go back over the stream, and now this is where the hill starts to come into play. We've just come down the hill, down Main Street, but now I've got to go back up it. There's a few awesome houses along this stretch, let me tell you. This will take us back to the main road. The houses I was referring to are these. Standing next to each other, these are Hallington House on the left and Brookside Farm on the right. They are 2 of the 11 listed buildings in the parish, a list that includes the church, the grammar school, the old rectory, and the bridge we've just used to cross back over the brook. After the bend on which those 2 stand, Osgathorpe becomes modern again. This eastern end of the village is all 20th century housing on later, similar properties to the ones we began at on Ashby Road. It's uphill now too, and little is recorded about this area. There is one thing though which I found quite interesting. Halfway up this hill is a brand new housing estate called Osgathorpe Grange, built by Chevin Homes. The houses all sit on a road called Jim Armitt's Close. Nearby is the Thomas Harley play area. These names were chosen by 2 pupils from local schools, Emily Emerson from Griffithdown Primary and Henry Buss from Grace Dew. The names reflect the history of the village. Thomas Harley is obvious, but Jim Armitt? Not so. If anyone knows who he was, let us all know in the comments. A return to Ashby Road marks the end of the walk. One of the reasons why Ashby Road has so few houses is all down to a gap between the two main areas of habitation. The gap is down to the industrial history of the area. Whilst most of Osgathorpe itself was populated by framework knitters, the need for transportation for other local industries meant building things through it. That's where the short-lived Charnwood Forest Canal, built in the late 18th century, came in. It was alternatively and informally known as the Forest Line. It ran through the gap between the houses on Ashby Road before reaching a junction a ways south of the Storey Arms. It then split into two sections, one that ran south and west towards Thringston, the other north and east towards Nampanton via Grace Dew. There are no visible remains of the canal in the village, but the now dried up canal bed at the junction is publicly accessible. All termini of the canal were linked to tramways. At Nampanton, a tramway ran all the way through Loughborough to the Grand Union Canal. It was engineered by a man we already know very well, William Jessup. He used an iron-edged railway in contrast to his partner Benjamin Outram, who for other such lines preferred the traditional L-shaped flange rail plateway. At Peggs Green there was a junction where one tramway spur led to Thringston and the other to Coal-Orton, and in the north the tramways led to the quarries at Cloud and Barrow Hill, both of which mined limestone. The canal's primary purpose though was to carry coal, which had previously been transported by packhorse to Leicester from the North West Leicestershire coalfields. So why was the canal short-lived? The answer is twofold. Unusually, it's nothing to do with the railways. First of all, the use of the Forest Line was limited until a feeder from Blackbrook Reservoir was finished. During floods in 1799, this collapsed and the canal went out of use for 2 years. Even after some repairs were carried out, further damage occurred and what little trade there'd been did not return. The other issue was the tramways. Due to the hybrid nature of the canal's construction, there were lots of technical, financial and legal problems at the coal mines it served. This meant the amount of coal carried eventually reduced to uneconomical levels. So the canal became derelict, and when the Leicester and Swannington Railway was authorised in 1830, there was no going back. A proposal, however, was drawn up to convert the canal to a wagonway or a railway throughout, and a bill was presented to Parliament to that end, but it was opposed and never passed. The Forest Line was officially abandoned in 1846. The railways took over from then onwards. More and more railway lines were built as the Nottinghamshire, Leicestershire and Derbyshire mining companies competed with each other to bolster their infrastructure. Subsequently, the Charnwood Forest Railway, or the Bluebell Line as it was known, opened in 1883. It took over part of the Forest Line's route between Grace Dew and Shepshead. It closed too in 1963. Our last job is to take a look at a chapel. This is a branch of the Exclusive Brethren and it's further up the Ashby Road. This was formerly a well-known inn and restaurant called The Gate. It's unknown how far back it dated, but it does appear on an 1835 OS map. John Asher was the licensee in 1842. In later years it became known as the Stockyard Pub and Nightclub. This led to a rather disturbing yet still somewhat hilarious situation for Osgathorpe's residents. They had to get used to lost, inebriated revellers wandering around the village in the dead of night. That's not something you expect in the heart of rural Leicestershire. And that will do us for Osgathorpe, one of the prettiest places I've come across so far in Leicestershire, and if the rest of the county is anything like this, I'll be a happy man. I've no plans to return to the county now until next year, but stick around if you're new, I promise you I will be back. See you later. Thanks for watching this video, folks. Don't forget to like this episode if you haven't already. It really makes a difference with YouTube. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel for more videos like this and give us a share too if you've got friends who'd like it. You can find all the links to my social media accounts below, as well as my Buy Me a Coffee page where you can donate to the channel. Also, if you've enjoyed this episode, have a look at some more videos in this series. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as the Village Idiot, and I'm out.